If you could ask anything in the world about me, what would it be? Stay tuned. Hey folks, welcome to Transplant Helper again today. My name is Jim Burrell. The other day on one of the Facebook groups or whatever, I posted a question, which was basically, if you could ask anything about me, what would it be? And I know many of you gave me a ton of question there, a ton of feedback in that, because I understand, I'm one of those guys who's up here on YouTube several different times a week. I'm giving you advice. I'm trying to encourage you, help you out. And I think a lot of you want to know more about me so you can kind of get an idea of where I'm coming from and, what I maybe have to offer or maybe not. So I've got about 15 or so questions I'm going to be answering today, and I'm going to be answering them as really right off the cuff, just whatever I think about in the moment. Now, I've taken time to write them down on some index cards just for my convenience, and so I won't miss anybody. But I'm going to be answering every one of those questions to some extent. So stick around and watch this, and you'll learn a little bit about me. And by the way, while you're there, just go ahead and scroll down beneath the suggested videos beneath this video and find the comment section. Start commenting below and tell me a little bit about you. Share your story. How's transplant gone for you? Are you waiting? Are you post-transplant? Just whatever you can think of. Share a little tidbit about yourself with me as well as the whole transplant helper community, and that will help us to get to know one another better so we can continue this work together while we go. Now, let me also ask you, if you're not a current subscriber to this channel, go ahead and hit the big subscribe button beneath the video, as well as the bell notification off beside that, and I promise you, I'll do my best to continue to provide you with content which helps to advocate, educate, and motivate you as a transplant helper. One more thing, while you're down there, the new 2019 Transplant Helper t-shirts are available. You can go and pick up one of those beneath this video as well in the comments section. There's a link there to go and purchase one of those. They're basically available in all types of colors. This just happens to be the red one, but go ahead and purchase one of those. That not only helps to support this program in a small way, but even more importantly, it helps to promote organ donation, organ awareness, transplant support, and education, whatever that you're going to be doing when you wear the t-shirt. Because a lot of times when I wear my Transplant Helper t-shirts, people ask questions, and I can give answers and I can give assistance, and you can do the same. You're a huge part of the transplant helper community when you get involved in that way. So all of that out of the way, I've got these index cards here with the questions on them. Like I say, there'll be about 15 I'll cover today. And basically, if you ask a question, I'm giving an answer, okay? It may not be that great. It may not be the answer you expect, but I'm going to give an answer today. So be ready for your name, your question. If you didn't ask a question, some of these questions are probably things you wanted to know anyway, so you can keep watching as well. Very first question here comes from Lucretia Garrett Curry, her married name, Lucretia Curry. She says, how do you keep your sanity with all of those females running around the house? Well, my first question for you is, what would make you think I'm keeping my sanity? I do. I have 5 females in the house, 4 daughters. Of course, my wife, and then including that, my 16-year-old, my 4-year-old, my 3-year-old, and my 2-year-old daughter here in the house. And we've adopted those bottom 3. My 16, now 17, I should say, 17-year-old, just turned that. But 17-year-old, also a birth child of ours. They can all be a handful, but I tell you what, I can be a handful as well. So I know there are times when, we get on one another's nerves, when things are not that easy, when there's so much running around, so much noise. I get under a lot of stress, and I'm stressed very easily. I'll just admit that. I don't have the best temperament in the world, so it takes a lot of practice. But I learned to block things out, and I also learned just to remember that I'm so blessed to have them as a part of my family. And so in spite of the difficulties that we have sometimes, in spite of how stressful and straining it can be on our sanity, our mental well-being, we just keep on going. And especially with the little ones, the 4, the 3, and the 2-year-old, they're all doing their different things, but at the same time, they're all kind of doing the same things. They're potty training. They're learning to sleep through the night. They're growing. They're learning. They're grasping everything. So I just kind of keep in focus of what I'm trying to do, but that is a part of my life, to have these adopted children in my house and to work with them and hopefully to help and provide them a place where they can be loved, and they very much are, and also to do the same for my 17-year-old daughter. She's 17, so she's dealing with all the new things that come with being a teenager and about to, exit high school, go into college. Her life's about to change. So we're just trying to really put a lot of focus into her right now to really get her ready and prepared. I've always said that the job of a good parent is to, like a mama bird, to prepare the children to leave the nest. And if they're not prepared to leave, you hadn't done your job. So really, your job as a parent is to work yourself out of a job. And when you can do that, I think you'll be successful. And that's what we at least try to do. So Lakeisha Garrett, thank you for that question. Yeah, I don't always have my sanity, but I do my best. Number 2 here comes up from Kathleen Yang. Kathleen Yang asks, did you like public speaking in school? Well, I assume you say that because you think I'm a decent public speaker, and I get a lot of comments sometimes beneath the videos, what do you really do? What's your background? Is it in television and whatever that is? Because I come across pretty good, I think, on these videos. I don't use notes usually. I've got cards today for the questions, but I don't use notes, and I usually don't really edit my videos very much. They're just straight through from top of my head memory. So I do like public speaking. And to answer your question specifically, when I was in school, I guess I did. I did not get to do a lot of it in high school, but what I did, I think I enjoyed. I think I like being in front of people. I think I like sharing with people. And so the few times I did that while I was in high school, I enjoyed it. When I was a senior in high school, I ran for SGA, or Student Government Association President. I didn't win. I'm not going to get into that. Long story. I lost in a very, 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 very tight race. But anyway, I gave a ton of speeches surrounding that. Now, since that time, since getting out of high school, I worked in the cabinet industry for 12 years. I was in supervision, so I did a lot of talking in front of large groups there, just my departments and people that work for me. I'm also a preacher by trade, and so I spend a lot of time preaching in a church, in a pulpit, and so I get a lot of public speaking experience there. So I think it probably has been something I've enjoyed most of my life, and this is just an extension of being able to do that. So Kathleen Yang, to answer your question, yeah, I think I probably did, albeit I like it more now than I probably did then. Question number 3 comes from Rachel Langland, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, but she asked, after your transplant, how long after that did you start doing your videos? Well, I've got a related question that's coming up in a minute, so I won't go too in-depth about it yet. I'll come back to it. But I think I probably started doing these videos maybe when I was about 3 years out of transplant, something like that. I had kind of been working as a transplant helper for a little while, as far as going face-to-face, sitting down with patients, advocating, educating, motivating the way that I like to do. But I was not doing videos at that point. My transplant coordinators, particularly one of them named Connie, there were several there that helped me, but they were really the driving force to encourage me and say, hey, Jim, you're doing a great work here at the hospital, at the clinic with patients, and we think if you could do something to where you could put that information out there for more people, that would be great. YouTube was one of the suggestions. I was a former YouTuber / podcaster anyway, so I had a little bit of experience in that. So I think about 3 years post-transplant, I decided, hey, let's just jump in there and let's start doing this. And I know on some of my earlier videos especially, I was pretty nervous about that. Not necessarily in front of the camera, but just nervous about, are people going to say, well, he thinks he's somebody because he does this, or he thinks he knows everything. That's absolutely not right. I don't know everything, and I'm not somebody. I'm just one of you. I'm just one of those people who decided, hey, here's a hole, here's a void that's not been filled. You can go on YouTube or all over the internet and you find tons of information from people who are telling about their journeys, how they got their transplants, how they felt, that sort of thing. I love to watch those stories. They're very encouraging. But then on the other side of that, there's some medical technical things there put out by, doctors where they say, this is this and this is so. But there wasn't really anything in the middle here that filled this gap where someone just sat down and said, I've been there, I'm doing that, and here's what life is about, and here's how you can live it. And really practical, but yet at the same time, educational type information. I don't think that was there. So Rachel Langland, about 3 years, I guess it was, I kind of started making these videos. We've been going now for almost 2 years. And so, yeah, I'm enjoying it, and hopefully I'll get to keep doing this for a while. So that was her question, Rachel Langland. Thank you for that question. Next question, number 4, from John Sanderson. John Sanderson. This one's simple. What did you have transplanted? Well, I'm a heart transplant recipient, May the 23rd, 2013. I was a congenital patient, so had problems from birth, repaired at 6 months. I always knew that repair would run out, and I would eventually need a transplant. So I'm one of the few people who knew about transplant my whole life and knew it was a possibility and something that would happen, and I got a heart transplant in 2013. And John's probably asking that because a lot of people who follow me, this channel is not just about heart transplant. It's about, heart, lung, liver, kidney, pancreas, whatever, as I say it. And maybe John received something else. But I'm a heart transplant recipient, and glad and thankful that I was able to get that opportunity. So thank you, John Sanderson, for that question. Next question, Laura Fleming. Laura Fleming asks, do you ever regret your decision to have a transplant? That's a difficult question. It's almost one that I don't want to answer one way or another, but I want to be honest. And so I'll tell you straight up, yes, I have at times, in periods of times, regretted my decision to get a heart transplant. I can admit, especially the first few months after transplant, they were so difficult. The recovery, I did very well, but on the other side, the recovery, especially emotionally, was very, very difficult. And I can remember a lot of times laying on the couch and even telling my wife, I wish I hadn't done this. I was living a good life then. I slept 16, 18 hours a day. Things weren't easy, but things were really hard after transplant. And I hated being away from my family. And I was in the hospital for a month or so, even after that, away from my family for 6 weeks post-transplant in an apartment. So altogether, I was away from my family maybe 2 months, and had been in and out of the hospital every single month for 2 years to some extent. So I hated that part. And transplant was the reason that was happening. I was having to be gone all the time. I wasn't there for a lot of things in my family's life, particularly my children's lives, that I wanted to be there for. I missed my daughter's 5th grade graduation. I didn't realize it was after it was over, but I missed my daughter's 5th grade year. I was introduced a couple of years ago. A lady walked up to me and shook my hand and said, "Hey, I'm so-and-so." Said, "I was Juliana." That's my 17-year-old daughter's teacher. She was in 5th grade then, but she said, "I was your daughter's 5th grade teacher." And I remember looking at him thinking, I've never seen you before in my life. And it's because I missed that. I was away, and, in and out sick, not able to go to the events. And so it was awful. And there were times I wish I had never gone through the transplant, because if I had never gone through it, maybe I'd have been there for some of that. Maybe I would have died, but maybe I'd have survived. I always felt like I was strong. I felt like I could drive through anything. And so even though transplant was being, deemed as necessary, I kind of felt like I could have gotten by without it, at least for a time. And I did. For 6 years, I put transplant off and waited. So, just a very difficult time. So yeah, I've regretted it. I feel, a little bit of survivor's remorse, that sort of thing. Things aren't perfect. There are ups and downs. I still have difficulties sometimes. The medications are hard. So yeah, I can say I have. Again, it was more in the beginning than now, but there are still days where I just shake my head like, man, I had a chance to just move on into eternity, go to be with my Lord, whatever, and I didn't get to do that because I'm still here. So, Laura Fleming, very good question. I know there are a lot of questions that could be answered about that, but that's kind of my take on it as well. Am I blessed? Yes, but I have had regrets. And there we go. Jamie Rowland. Jamie Rowland asked, what are the risk factors for your children to develop any problems? And then she asked, do they have routine cardiology visits? Well, to answer that question, there are small risk factors because the condition that I was born with was congenital. So there's a possibility there that they could have had some issues at birth. Again, my daughter's 17, my son is 12, and then I've got the adopted children, 3 of them. Probably no connection there. Obviously, they're adopted. But as far as my birth children, there are some risk factors that they do carry. And I can remember back when my wife was pregnant with my daughter, we took my wife to my pediatric cardiologist and got him to do some extensive, in-womb testing to see about her even before she was born. Did the same for my son, but just to check and make sure they weren't going to have the exact condition I did. And if there were any issues, maybe they could be handled very quickly at birth or even at times before birth. You know, they can operate on a baby in the womb now sometimes. So we really want to check that out. And since that time, as many years as they've been so far, we continue to, keep a close eye on them at least and ask a lot of questions. And we're really in tune and in check with their health and making sure that they're not developing something that eventually could put them in the same position I've been in. So maybe that answers both questions. The risk factors are, yes, as a congenital patient, there could have been some hereditary issues. And yeah, we do have them routinely checked. It's just, kind of part of what you do as a parent, especially when you've dealt with this before. So that was question number 6. Thank you so much for that. Timothy Taylor, a friend of mine. I've worked with Tim for a while back in the day. Question number 7, Tim asked, does it scare you that when you went under for transplant, that you did not have a spiritual occurrence? I'll tell you this, I'm not sure I didn't have a spiritual occurrence. Now, maybe not like people would have that you see on television where it's, it says, oh, I saw the light, or I saw this or that, and someone believes they went to heaven or hell. I didn't have any of that. I did not have any of that. But I'll say this, leading up to transplant and during transplant and after transplant, I have done my best to be even more spiritually connected. Again, I'm a Christian. I believe in God. I have faith in God. I trust the Word of God, all of that. And I'll tell you, when I was being carried back, I always had this dream. Let me back up a little bit. I always had this reoccurring dream pre-transplant that at some point they'd come to get me for transplant and be rolling me on the gurney toward the OR, and I just, panic, freak out, jump off the gurney and run away because I didn't want to do it, because I thought about transplant for what it is. Let's be honest, they're going to take my heart out, drop it in a trash can, not literally, but, take my heart out, throw it out, and put a new one in and hope it starts. And I was terrified of that. I wake up in cold sweats about that. But I'll say this, if you want to think about a spiritual occurrence, this was based on my trust and faith in God. But as I was being rolled to the OR, I thought I would do that. I didn't. I was just as calm and peaceful. Even when the doors open, I saw everything that was going on. I was calm and peaceful with that. So yeah, that's really about how I felt about it. So great question. I appreciate that. Okay, next question, Karen Kennedy. How can we pray for you? Karen, you actually asked me this question a lot. You and your husband and all are very faithful, spiritual, people and all, and I do appreciate every kind of prayer. I need a lot of prayer for strength, for comfort, for peace, for courage sometimes to say what needs to be said in the right moment. So if you can pray for me, please do that. I don't mind that. I enjoy that. I appreciate that. And I always trust that if someone says, I'm going to pray for you, I trust that you're going to. So that makes me feel good. It gives me, some peace that I know people are praying for me. So Karen Kennedy, if you can pray for me and you choose to do that, you do it. And anybody else that wants to do that as well. But while you're doing that, pray for the whole transplant community. Pray for donors and their families so we can just keep this journey available to as many as possible. So Karen Kennedy, thank you for that question. Pray for me any way that you're willing to do, and I will be thankful for that. Okay, so next question here. Question number 9 comes from Nadia Smith. I know her as Nikki. But anyway, Nadia Smith asked, do you ever get an opportunity to share the gospel or other spiritual knowledge with other transplant buddies? Nadia, to answer that question, the answer is yes, I do. Especially, I could remember back immediately after transplant, my recovery was going so well. As a matter of fact, they came in and told me pretty much after transplant that I had received the best heart they had seen in 3 years or better, that I was having the best recovery they had seen in 25 years at the time. My surgeons and all were saying this, and I remember many times people would come in my room right after transplant, and I was the guy who woke up 45 minutes after transplant. begged them to take out my breathing tube, which they did. They told me then, said, you don't want us to take this out, because if we take this out and you don't start back breathing, remember we put it in while you're asleep. It's going to be a lot harder on you putting it in while you're awake, and it's dangerous to do. And I kept begging, take it out, take it out, take it out. I wanted to talk. They did take it out. So 45 minutes after surgery, I was awake. Some people are in a coma for 24, 48 hours a week, and, breathing tubes and all. All that stuff was gone. I got that stuff out quickly. I was set up in the bed talking, and a lot of what I think I had to say, and that's a blurry moment, but I think I had to say was probably about how much God had helped me. And I know many a times there would be during the CICU, which is the most critical part of the stay, there are a lot of times when people would come in, one nurse will bring another nurse in and say, you need to meet this guy. You need to hear his story. You need to hear, about his courage and his faith. And so, yeah, I had a tremendous opportunity, especially early on, to do that. And I was able to talk, on a spiritual level with everybody, including my surgeon. And a lot of times people look at transplant surgeons, and everybody's got their different ideas. But some surgeons are very educated people, do not claim to have a trust in God. And I remember my transplant surgeon, I talked to him a little bit about it then, and he told me, he said, Jim, I know one thing, and that is I've never been in an operating room by myself. And I know what he meant by that. And so we were able to discuss some things concerning God and the faith that I have and he had, and the trust and the comfort that we have. So I was able to do that. And since that time, I met a ton of people. I do this more face-to-face when I sit down with someone, but I meet a ton of people now, and I always will say a prayer with them, and always, talk to them as best I can, or at least try to open a conversation to be talking about that. I don't do as many spiritual type programs here. I try to keep the content on the Transplant Helper more to the advocate, educate, motivate side. But of course, motivation, part of that is that. And I do plan in the future, we're really going to add a lot. I'm going to add a lot to those types of programs and try to really increase that, because I tell people on the end of every program to stay stronger. And what that means is to stay stronger physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Okay, so I really want to add to that and give people the knowledge that I know I should be sharing with them, because the physical side of things, learning about that, making it through that is great. But if you survive this life and have to stand before a God you do not know, that's not going to work. So yes, I do try to do that as often as I can. And Nikki, I know that you're absolutely a wonderful person to do that as well. And thank you for what you do to impact other people's lives spiritually. But thank you for that question. That was question number 9 from Nikki Smith. Question number 10. Now, I can't say this name very well, so here we go. Robert LaRousse, L-E-R-O-U-S, Robert LaRousse. I probably messed that up. I'm sorry. But he asked this question. He said, I'm waiting for a liver transplant, and I'm really afraid. Well, I'll say this in the beginning, Robert. If you were not afraid, I would think there was something wrong with you. And I have people sometimes, they especially get nervous when they're going through the evaluation process. And I've had a ton of videos about the evaluation process. I can link up here and in the description below as well. But when they're going through the evaluation process, a part of that process is a mental evaluation. A psychotic, they go to a psychiatrist or a psychologist, and they're quizzed and grilled about their mental state. And that's very important, very important that we have our mental state and capabilities in best order we can, so we can handle the difficulty of transplant. But I tell people sometimes when they're nervous about that, they say, oh no, I'm scared to death of transplant. I'm afraid I'm going to die. I'm afraid of this. And, fear is what the game is sometimes. And I tell them, if you weren't that way, I think you were crazy. That would be a key to me that something's not right in your mind. I think any person who says, we're going to take an organ out of your body, as I mentioned a moment ago, take it out and toss it and put a new one in and hope it starts and hope that you have a good life. Very, 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 very dangerous situation to be in. The last resort is transplant for any condition. And so, yeah, I would really just encourage you to keep your faith in God. Just, stay strong. Look to your friends, your family, to whoever you can to support you. Trust your teams. Find yourself a good transplant team to work with and put your trust in them. and, pray. And I'll be praying for you, Robert, for sure, that you can have the best journey you can. So transplant is not easy. And if you weren't afraid, I would be worried about you if that were the case. So thank you for that question. Question number 11 comes from Melissa Watkins. Melissa Watkins asked this question: do you think that being an advocate for heart transplant patients was your calling? Well, Melissa, I don't necessarily know that for sure, but I know this. I've done a lot of things in life. I started building cabinets. I kind of became a cabinet maker when I was around 12 or 14 years old. I worked professionally building cabinets for about 12 years or so in my early adulthood. I moved from being a cabinet maker to a preacher, to standing in a pulpit, preaching in a church, and really enjoyed that. I certainly know that I'm called by God to do that. I know that, through His Word, through the Bible, I see the need for, going out and teaching and preaching the gospel of Christ. I know that's the case. And as far as this, transplant helper, in a way, it is a ministry. I'm not serving people's spiritual needs, but I'm certainly hopefully serving people's physical and emotional needs. And I hope I'm providing a service that helps, people along the way to be able to do that. Maybe I've helped you or your family. I don't know, but I hope that that's the case. And so, yeah, I kind of do. I feel called to do this. I've at least stepped up to the plate to do it. And right now, I know there are tons of people doing similar things, but I'm one of the very few doing it on Facebook. If you search for transplant help or transplant education or transplant anything really on YouTube or on Google, you'll find my name popping up. And so, yeah, I think there's a reason for that. I think I've been assisted to do that. So, yeah, I think I'm called to do it. And thank you for that question. Very good question, Melissa Watkins. Thank you so much. Question number 12 comes from a great friend of mine. He's a contractor, a wonderful friend, fellow Christian. He's encouraged me a lot in my life. I get to see him on a regular basis because he's local. But Philip Gallagher asked this question, not transplant related, but he said, when are we going to Boswells Wings to get a Mile High burger? Philip has been talking about this new place. He helped to remodel and to get open one of the local restaurants down the road from us, Boswells Wings. Awesome place, beautiful place, kind of a classic place. You can eat burgers and fries and wings and all. And I've been down there. I enjoyed it. And so, Philip, I'll go anytime you want to go, man. I tell people I'm blessed. I usually eat 3 times a day. Not everybody gets to do that, but I'll go anytime I want to go. But, I enjoy your company as much as anything, Philip, and you know that. So if we can spend time together, I might not always get to eat the Mile High burger. That's probably not the best thing for my diet or yours, but I'll enjoy it if we get to go. And hey, I said if we ask a question, we answer it. So Philip, there's your answer. Call me. Let's go. Okay. Next one up, Frankie Sutherland. Frankie is the wife of one of my transplant friends, also a fellow Christian and such that I have a lot of discussion with back and forth and such. Frankie Sutherland asked, what made you decide to be or to do the transplant helper? Well, again, that goes back to something I've said in 2 other questions. I kind of found a void there. I found something that didn't exist. When I was working toward transplant, and I'm a techie guy, so I'm looking on Google and on YouTube, what's transplant about? How do you survive transplant? All the stories. I didn't find anything. I found people who were telling about, I'm 3 days out of transplant, I'm walking around the hall, or, I'm a year out of transplant, I feel great, or I went to the doctor and found that. I found that, and I also found the very technical medical jargon. I couldn't find anything in the middle, so I wanted to fill the hole in the middle. But what really inspired me to do this, and I've said this before, was really just when I first got my transplant, I started really working harder to go back to my transplant floor, HTICU, which you're very familiar with at UAB, but to go back to the transplant floor and just to talk with my nurses and my coordinators and to visit, to be grateful and to show my appreciation for what they did for me and my family while I was there. They're like an extended family anyway. And I would go up there, and there were times when my coordinator, Connie, would say, hey, can you go talk to so-and-so? Can you call this person, or can they call you? Can you exchange information? They're having a difficult time. They're facing transplant. They need to know what it's like and what to expect. And I would do a little bit of that. And then I would go up on the floors. The nurses would, of course, do the same. And I got to where I would knock on the door very apprehensively, but I'd knock on the door and talk to people at times on request. And then as I was encouraged to start doing this channel, it was something I was kind of getting my feet wet in. But the number one inspiration, I want to say this straight up, I've said it before, the number one inspiration in my life came down to a very good friend of mine who's recently passed. She was a double lung transplant. Her name was Joni Badgett. Joni Badgett impacted my life more than anybody. I was asked by a family member, I think it was a cousin, I was asked by a family member. I did not know her. She's from my area, but I didn't know her. I was asked to go and visit with her, and I'd already been visiting a few people by that point, but I was asked to go and see her. And I walked in that day, and I saw a person who was absolutely, she's about a month out of transplant, really, really struggling, having a hard time. I saw a person who was emotionally done. I mean, physically struggling, but emotionally done. And she was there. Her in-laws were there. I think her sister was there at the time, my first time I went in to see her. And I just saw she was done. I mean, she just didn't have it. And I knew that if you don't have the heart for this, and I mean by that, not any pun, I mean if you don't have the mentality for this, you're not going to make it. And I saw Joni, this little weak, feeble woman sitting there and broken and just struggling. And I started to talk, and we talked for 45 minutes. She could barely talk, though. She had on oxygen. She was having struggling breathing, but we talked for a long time. And I told her about my life. I told her about what I've been through. I told her about the things to expect. And I saw her change over 30 or 45 minutes. I saw her whole life change. I saw her point of view change, her willing to live. I saw that come back in her, and I saw a flame come in her, and I saw her really begin to work. And as I came back to see her week after week there for a while until she finally was released from the hospital, I saw Joni transform. And so she and I became the best of, friends. We talked back and forth on Facebook constantly. She was a tremendous encourager to the transplant world, especially the cystic fibrosis / lung transplant world. Tremendous encouragement. And Joni was an inspiration. She lost her battle. She took a turn for the worst a while back. I was able to attend her funeral. Still can't stay connected with her family, but Joni was the one. I mean, there are others. And I've met so many people. It's been so wonderful. But Joni Badgett's the one. And it was when I met with Joni that I decided, I got to do this. And I started making videos, and I started reaching out to people, and I started befriending people and really becoming aggressive. If there's somebody in my local transplant center, UAB, that I can see, I'm going to see them. And so I make regular trips over there just to see who's been transplanted, just to try to make, at least to show my face in everybody's room, and to connect with them as much as they're willing to do. And you were one of those people. You and your husband were one of those people. So, yeah, that's about how I decided to do it. I saw a need, and I really felt a pull to do it. And Joni was a huge part of that, and now you all are a part of that as well. Thank you for that question. Great question, Frankie Sutherland. Number 14, so we're almost done. Buster Kruger says, and I said I'd answer anything, didn't I? Did you hear me? I said I would answer anything. What do you think of the offensive coordinator, Josh Harris, that Michigan just hired from Alabama? Well, first of all, Alabama has so many coaches. I'm a huge fan of Alabama. I'm a Nick Saban, lover, or whatever you want to call that. I'm proud of the success Alabama's had. Didn't work out as well this year. But Alabama goes through coaches one after another. They go through players that transfer one after another. And so, hey, if Michigan or any other school can benefit from what's been done here, from the process, more power to them. And if it puts out a good coach or a good player, or you steal a prospect like Josh Harris or whatever, Michigan, whatever school, go ahead and do it. And we're going to continue to work hard at Alabama. I say we're, it ain't really got nothing to do with that. I just turn on the TV. But Alabama is going to continue to work hard, and I know your schools will as well. So, yeah, that's what I think about it. If you want them, you can have them. Good luck with that. And maybe they'll be a success. That's what I hope. And the last question here, back kind of transplant related. Jennifer Lynn, number 15, Jennifer Lynn. What kind of things did you go through before transplant? Ooh. Now, there's a question. again, I was a congenital patient. I lived 38 years leading up to transplant. Before I was transplanted, I was 38 by the time I was transplanted. I had one surgery at 6 months old. At the time, I was the youngest baby in Alabama to have open heart surgery back in 1975. So really big deal there, a dangerous deal, stressful time. As a child, I had no issues. I had restrictions, sure enough. I couldn't exercise. I couldn't run, jump, and play like the other kids at times. I had some struggles because of that, but I really did well. I was 32 when I started having issues, and the issues were rhythm-based. The doctors predicted every step what was next, and if this is happening, this is next, and this is where it's going to lead. And I knew transplant was in my future. Transplant, the journey itself, once it officially started, I was around 32 to 38, so 6 years. Not easy at all. I mean, in and out of the hospital all the time. I think for the last 2 years, I was in the hospital every single month for 8-10 days at a time. Not easy being away from my family. Condemned to the hospital the last month or so, away from my family on Milrinone drip, which many of you have been on Milrinone, or maybe you're on it right now. Milrinone drip 24/7, IV bag and a fanny pack off my side. I kept on keeping on, though. I was able to keep going. Everything that I was doing, once I got on the Milrinone, where I had kind of some go-go juice and some energy, I kept on going. And so I was able to move on with that. And, it was not easy, and the issues were numerous. I had infections. My PICC line that my Milrinone was going in got infected. That took a big turn. I almost died during that because of the infection. The infection was so severe that they gave me everything they could and couldn't get me better. Finally, my cultures came back. They sent those to the CDC, Center of Disease Control, and they found out what it was, which was very rare. And in turn gave me the perfect antibiotic cocktail for that. And in 48 hours, I was recovered. But I had to stay on oral antibiotics for 2 years as a result. So yeah, dangerous stuff. I was quarantined. I found out that whatever it was I had stirring in me lives on surfaces for like 28 days after I touched that. So very contagious, very difficult time. But I made it through that, got to transplant. Since transplant, I've had relatively little issues, none related to my heart. I've never had rejection or infection of the heart since then. I've had a lot of other issues, medication-wise, the typical stuff, good days, bad days. A lot of issue with my eyes. I've changed glasses. I had a program. I've changed glasses like 4 times since transplant, and a lot of issues with dizziness, lightheadedness, which something's going on in my brain. I was nearly convinced I had a brain tumor at one point, which I've had 2 strokes in the past. So when you start feeling like you're having the same issues, you wonder what it is, if it's stroke or tumor or whatever. But seemingly I'm cleared on all that, so I'm moving on. But not an easy journey at all, Jennifer. Not an easy journey, but definitely worth living, okay? So whatever your situation you or your family's in, just keep on keeping on and stay stronger, and you can do it. It's well worth it. Just know it's not easy. It can be an uphill battle, but yet nonetheless one definitely worth living. Okay, so we've answered 15 questions today. I may do this again. I know this has gone a whole lot longer than most of my videos. I try to max videos out around 18-20 minutes. We're looking at 40 almost. So most of you are long gone, but for those of you who stuck around, how about comment below in the video? Even if you've already commented, comment below in the video and say, I'm still here, or something to that extent, so I know you watched it toward the end. And thank you so much for all of you who gave me questions. Thank you for that. I've enjoyed this. Again, I'd like to hear more about your lives, so you can be commenting beneath the video telling about that. But hopefully the questions I've answered in a way that was satisfactory to what you wanted to hear. I couldn't tell you anything but the truth, and hopefully that's what I've done. I've been pretty candid about some things. Transplant is a journey, folks. It is definitely a journey, and it's one that I'm blessed to be able to live. And so thank you. Thank you for letting me be a part of your life. I know some of you spend a lot of time watching these videos, and I thank you for every second you spend doing that, for all the support, for the prayers, for the encouraging words, for the t-shirt purchases, whatever you're able to do, sharing this. I appreciate it. I sure appreciate it more than you know. Basically, the transplant helper, the work as a transplant helper has kind of become my favorite part of life. You know, next to God and my actual physical family, this is something I love to do. So hopefully I can keep on doing it for a long while. Hopefully you'll be a part of it in the future and you'll be able to help others as well. Again, thank you so much for joining me today, and until next time, stay stronger, friends.